Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from passionate Reds, only on All for United. Hello and welcome back to All for United. It's another transfer roundup. Lucky, privileged to be joined by a special guest today, Dharmesh Sheth, Sky Sports News reporter. The guy who we like to scroll through the timeline of to see what's happening with Manchester United during these busy summers. Dharmesh, thank you for giving us your time. I know you are snowed under at the moment, so I really appreciate it. A lot happening, and I heard you earlier on today on Sky Sports talking a little bit about where Manchester United are at with our midfielder hunt. So shall we start there? De Jong mentioned, so many names mentioned, but where are Manchester United at in terms of trying to bring a midfielder into the club?
Yeah, hello there, Ben. Thanks for having me back on the show. Look, the information I'm given now is that the midfield and a central midfielder is the number one priority for Manchester United this summer. And I'm also told that United and Barcelona remain in talks over the signing of Frankie de Jong. Now, this is the posturing time frame for the transfer window, in that, you know, everyone will say the right things. Barcelona will say we want to keep him. The agent and de Jong maybe will say, look, I've got no problem staying. Manchester United will be quite reluctant to give out information on whether they're after a player or not. At the end of the day, it's not in Barcelona's interest to say we'll be prepared to sell Frankie de Jong. But look, the information we're getting is that Manchester United definitely in for him, that they remain in talks to try and sign him. He's got a contract at Barcelona until 2026, so he won't be cheap. But look, he is one of a number of midfielders that United are looking at. But it just feels, the noises we're getting here, that there's a growing feeling that this one could happen, that de Jong would be open to going to Manchester United. Having said that, United aren't in a position where they'll say they'll pay silly money for a player, and they would walk away if they don't get a reasonable price for someone like Frankie de Jong. But on the flip side, he is a player that Erik ten Hag knows very well. He was central in that midfield when they got to the Champions League semi-finals a few seasons ago, and we were just pipped in stoppage time against Tottenham. So you can understand why Erik ten Hag is interested in de Jong. So talks are continuing. And, you know, compared to 2 or 3 weeks ago, it's looking a little bit more likely that he could go to United rather than not.
Looking likely, and you mentioned the posturing and the negotiations that happen behind the scene, but there's been a few bits of conflict around a bid, Dharmesh. Has there been a bid? Hasn't there been a bid? And I'm sure a lot of fans out there think that football negotiations and transfers are as easy as making a signing on FIFA, unfortunately. But it isn't that easy, is it? From as far as you're concerned, talk's going to continue until an agreement comes in, or will United start throwing bids left, right and centre? How does it work?
It works differently for different transfers. You might get a situation where a club will put in a bid, it will get rejected. They'll put in another bid, it will get rejected. They'll put in another bid, it will get rejected. The way that I'm hearing this one is working is United and Barcelona will talk, and United will have a valuation of what they're prepared to pay Barcelona, and Barcelona will have a valuation of what they're prepared to receive from Manchester United. And as it stands, look, there's no deal done, and that would imply that there is a gap in those valuations. So I think it's one of those situations where you'll have talks continuing behind the scenes, and then they'll reach a compromise if this deal is to be done and satisfies all parties. But talks will continue until that final bid, or the first bid. It could be the first bid that goes in, because that's the one that they'll have agreed on verbally. And it becomes into semantics, doesn't it? When is a bid a bid? Is it when Manchester United go to Barcelona and say we'd be willing to pay X amount of million for him? Or is it when it is in black and white and on paper to say this is the official bid to Barcelona for Frankie de Jong? So that's why, you know, sometimes when you hear a bid has been made and there's denials from all clubs, and then maybe the transfer goes through and you think, well, those clubs have lied. Well, strictly speaking, they might not have lied, because it could have just been talks and talks and talks before a one and only official bid that was acceptable to all parties goes through. This happens in transfer business all the time. It's I like to call this stage of the transfer window, when we're a week into it, the shadow boxing phase, when they're just testing out the resolve of other clubs on how much they can get a price down to, or how stubborn a club is going to be with regard to how much they're willing to charge for a player.
Feels very weird, this transfer window, though, Dharmesh. I don't know about you in terms of that. I know we've had international tournaments in the summer, but we've got this Nations League happening at the moment, so players are on international duty. Then you've got the fact that a lot of clubs are starting their pre-season in literally 2 weeks' time, 2.5 weeks' time. So it sort of feels that there's a bit of animosity maybe within fan bases when they're not seeing the fact that deals have been done already or things are happening already. A lot of United fans asking the question, well, what's taken so long? I mean, you've put it nicely there in terms of what you said. You've also said that, they're happy with how talks are progressing, but ultimately is that the underlying fact here? Things are progressing, but you've got to be patient. There's a big player and two big clubs at the table at the moment.
I think with Manchester United, they want to do the right deals. They've had a few years when they've been criticised for doing deals that haven't worked out. And when you think about it, when Manchester United keep changing their managers since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, there's been that issue where you've had managers with different philosophies who want to bring in their own players. And what ends up happening, you end up with a squad that's full of players from 4 or 5 different regimes. And everyone knows it's much easier to sack a manager rather than to get rid of a whole load of players who are on long-term contracts. So I think United, this is going back to when they employed Ralph Rangnick, and whether you believe whether that worked or not, I think in a way it was Manchester United's way of just taking a step back and not making a decision about a manager straight away, because they said, let's just see who's available in the summer. Let's get to the summer. And then when the new manager comes in, we want to try and have a structure at that football club whereby if the new manager doesn't work, and I know that's a negative way of looking at it, even though Ten Hag's only been there a few weeks, but they do have to look at this in a long-term strategical way now, because it hasn't worked in the past. So if they can get a structure in place and a thread and a philosophy through the football club, then whoever the manager is, the players that are at the club will fit what the manager's philosophy is, rather than the other way around. And a manager having to come in and saying, these players don't fit my philosophy, I need to get rid of 10 and bring in another 10. And then the cycle will continue. And I think with regard to Erik Ten Hag, yes, it's obvious that he wants to bring in new players because he's a new manager and he's seen what has happened to United in the past season in particular. Yes, we need to make new signings is probably his thinking. But he also is well aware that there are a lot of players at the club who are talented players who haven't done what probably they were bought to do last season, but are on long-term contracts. And it's not as easy as to say, well, you didn't do it last season, so away you go. It just simply is not that simple. So I think he wants to treat this as a clean slate. And there are a lot of players who have already left and who may still leave the football club. And once that has happened, he can have a look at that squad and make his own mind up about these players. Is it a talent thing? Is it an attitude thing? Is it a philosophy thing? And then if there are players who maybe didn't perform last season, but are of the philosophy and the same philosophy that Erik Ten Hag has got, then, they could shine under Erik Ten Hag alongside some of the players that they bring in. So I'm sure that every football club, when they go into a transfer window, would love to have that situation where the first day of pre-season, this is the squad and it's done. And this is a squad they're going to move forward with. I don't think that's going to be the case with United, because they do need to buy players, but they also need to assess under a new manager what the current crop are going to do and whether they fit the plans of the new manager. If you look at what Liverpool and City are doing, and it will pain Manchester United fans to say this, but it's almost like what it was like when Manchester United were at their pomp under Sir Alex Ferguson, because you'd always see summer transfer windows where you might have one or two players being released and one or two players coming into the club, and it would just be evolution rather than revolution. And for the past 8 years or so, it's had that feeling of revolution, continuous revolution under new managers. And I think they want to put a stop to that, to see what the squad is like now, and then to top up that squad with the players that Ten Hag wants to bring in.
I think that's a superb summary. And I think we are seeing with Liverpool and City, they've sort of come full circle now. So they're able to do that. Whereas we're now building the circle. We've just started drawing the circle. And I think ultimately the thing that excites me as well about a few names that we're about to talk about too, they're players that Ten Hag's familiar with. They're players that have played under Ten Hag. So they should be able to hit the ground running in his system and in his way of playing. And hopefully that will also bring a positive attitude to the camp when it comes to who the manager is, when it comes to believing in the manager, because you've got those leaders and those enforcers, if you like, ambassadors of what Ten Hag does as well. And I think having that confidence in the manager and that positivity around the football club can only be seen as a great thing and a superb thing, because Rangnick didn't have that and the players didn't want to clearly play for him, and they down tools. And that's my opinion there. And they didn't deal with it. Different personalities jumping up here and there. Couldn't deal with it.
I'm picking up on what Liverpool and City. This is an absolute case in point. We're a week into this transfer window as we speak just now. And what have Liverpool and City done? They've brought in Erling Haaland at City, and they're bringing in Darwin Nunez at Liverpool. The two positions where I think outsiders and fans of Liverpool and City were thinking, I think that's an area that they need to strengthen. City are number 9. Liverpool with the aging front three, even though they're still doing an amazing job, and with Mane's future up in the air, they need to recruit in that position. And they've done it within a week of the transfer window opening. And I think that's what United used to be able to do. But who's to say that can't happen in the future? Because as you were saying, Liverpool and City are in that position now. United are trying to get into that position. And if you think about, if Ten Hag does work, and I'm sure every United fan will hope that he does, then in 2 or 3 transfer windows, who knows? United could be in that position where within a week of a transfer window opening, let's just get the 2 players we need, get the business done, get the 2 players we don't need anymore, get them out of the club, get the money in for them, and we're ready to go for pre-season. They're not at that stage just now. But if everything works out, and it can work out, Jurgen Klopp took a few years for it to work out at Liverpool, and now look at what he's doing. It can happen.
Just as United fans, got to keep our fingers crossed. I'm sure there's many people watching right now who have got their fingers crossed. Can I come back and ask you about the Darwin Nunez to Liverpool deal? Because there was a lot of speculation around United not wanting to enter a bidding war and United missing out on Nunez, as a lot of people went for. But before we move on to him and to a few more players, I just want to ask your opinion on Frankie de Jong. Do you see a situation where United walk away from this deal if they don't see that the valuation of the player is there? Because my personal opinion, and just reading in between the lines, it feels like there's a lot hanging on United getting this deal done, and ultimately at some point a compromise should and could be met. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it just earlier. I think United don't want to pay silly money. They don't want to be in that position where history has shown, particularly in the last few years, it's called the Manchester United tax, isn't it? I think Newcastle United will be feeling that now that they've got a big cash injection at their football club. But United, whenever they went in for a player, it was almost accepted that the price would go up compared to if they joined another club. And I don't think United want to put themselves in that position anymore. And you can't blame them for doing that, particularly at a time when they haven't qualified for the Champions League and are not getting the money from that. And as much money as United might have to be spending on transfers, and as much money as they have spent in recent years, they've still got a budget, and they've still got a situation where they need to balance the books as well. And they don't want to be in a position where they'll be spending hundreds of millions of pounds on players when they can get them for a little bit less. So, yes, of course, there is that situation where if Barcelona aren't going to budge on a particular price and Manchester United don't want to meet that price, yes, they could walk away from that deal because of what I've just mentioned there. But this one just feels like there could be a willingness from all parties to get it done, because as much as Barcelona will want to stick to a really high price for a player who's an international and has got 4 years left on his contract, it's much publicized the financial situation that exists at Barcelona. And I think Manchester United will be very well aware of that financial situation and won't want to be in a position where they're paying over the odds of what they think Frankie de Jong is worth. But I get your point as well. When people are seeing a lot of news and about United being in for Frankie de Jong, and social media is a wonderful thing, isn't it? It's like if it doesn't happen, then suddenly, oh, United have missed out, where there might be something more attached to that story than simply saying that.
Can I ask you a quick question on that? And I hope you don't mind it, because you mentioned to me before, and I think you mentioned it at the start of the show as well, about United prioritising the midfield. And also you've mentioned there about United getting their heads together, so to speak, and creating a platform here of footballers to play for the club and be able to kick on regardless of who the manager is. I mean, you've covered United and transfers for a good few years now, and you've been through the previous windows under previous regimes. Are you at all confident that United have a plan in place if we don't land Frankie de Jong? Do you think there are other targets being thought about? Because I know some fans are a little bit sceptical whether that is or could be the case.
Yeah, I mean, look, all of the information I get when talking about United, it's not just one player that they're after. There is a number of players that they would be looking at in the positions that would be priority positions for them this summer, because a club like United, you wouldn't expect them just to have one target, because if they spent a couple of months just on one target and it doesn't work, where does that leave them? Then you're in a position where you might have to pay over the odds, because a club who will be selling a player that's not Frankie de Jong, and if United go for someone else, they will know, gosh, they've missed out on someone. They'll be desperate to try and get someone in. And it's Manchester United as well. They'll be able to afford it. Let's charge them this much. So I get your point. I just don't think United would put themselves in that position. And from what I can see from the outside as well, it just seems that they're trying to build a structure at Old Trafford. And it seems they're trying to build that structure for the first time for 8 years since Sir Alex Ferguson left. Because I think the issue United had was not only Sir Alex Ferguson leaving, but at the same time, David Gill left the football club. So both of them leaving at the same time proved to be a bit of a problem for United, because then you had David Moyes coming in, joining a big club like Manchester United, and Ed Woodward taking over the transfers when he hadn't completed and dealt with transfers that closely before. I just think if Sir Alex Ferguson had stayed for another season alongside Ed Woodward, or David Gill had stayed at the football club for one more season alongside David Moyes, I'm not saying it would have been different. I'm just saying they would have been in perhaps a better position in that first transfer window when David Moyes was trying to do business, because it would either have been David Moyes and David Gill doing the transfers, or Sir Alex Ferguson and Ed Woodward doing the transfers. And I just wonder how it would have panned out in that transfer window, and then what would have happened moving forward, because would they have got the players that they were going for in that transfer window to take United 2 or 3 years on and then evolve that squad that Sir Alex Ferguson had left? I just think that this time they've realized they need a structure in place. And I think if you look at the structure now, whether you agree or not that whether the right people are there, it seems that there's more of a structure at the football club at the top than there was before. And when you have a structure like that, it's simple, isn't it? If you look at other clubs who have got sporting directors and technical directors who are helping out and recruiting managers and players, they seem to be more stable. And I think United are moving towards that position whereby they can get the recruitment right of both managers and players. And if one of them goes wrong, the manager usually pays with his job. They can bring in a manager who's going to be able to work with the players that are there, as opposed to having to rip the squad out and then bring in new players in again.
I partly asked that question for those out there that are still having a debate on Twitter. Who would be the better signing, Ruben Neves or Frankie de Jong? Because I think that's the one that's going around quite a bit at the moment. And also other names in the hat as well, as we've discussed on this channel before. Let's talk about the striker situation. We've spoken about this. I know we've only got 10, 15 minutes left, so we'll try and breeze through these. But Darwin Nunez has gone to Liverpool. A lot of speculation out there that he rebuffed a move to United. He rejected a move to United and went to Liverpool. But you've got some more detail on that, I believe.
Well, look, I've the information I've been given, and I can only relay that information. I mean, there are always two sides to every story. Now, again, social media is always awash, isn't it? With Manchester United have missed out to Liverpool for Darwin Nunez, and looking behind the story, maybe not strictly 100% true. If you look at the situation, Manchester United is the information that I've got is that they are after improving the forward line, not necessarily bringing in a number 9. Remember, they've already got one of the best number 9s that the world's ever seen in Cristiano Ronaldo. So yes, 37-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo, and Manchester United fans will be wondering, look, one more season, what are they going to do after that? But they're looking to improve the forward line. Now, we know that there is an interest in the Ajax winger, Antony. Again, Erik ten Hag going back to what he knows, going back to a club where he used to manage, going back to a player who was a regular under him for the past 2 seasons at Ajax. So that there is an interest there. And he's a winger. So that would kind of, justify that argument that it's not just a strict number 9 that they're after. Darwin Nunez was a player that they looked at. He was a player that they were interested in. But from what I've heard, I think that interest waned, not simply because Liverpool were after the player and that they could offer Champions League football, but also Manchester United's interest waned because they lost interest at the price that was being quoted for Darwin Nunez for a position that wasn't the top priority for United. Because if you were to ask United fans, I think they'd probably say midfield is the number 1 priority. And I think the club share that view. So to spend, for example, if they got Darwin Nunez for 100 million euros all in, including add-ons, how much of the budget would have been left to get a central midfielder? So, United do have to budget as well. So what would be the top priority? And it seems the top priority is the midfielder. So if they are to get the midfielder and spend the money from their budget on the midfielder, then I think they will reassess how much money have we got left? What areas do we need to improve next? Let's see if we can bring in someone in the forward line. So I think Antony is one that they're looking at. He's, again, I know I keep saying it, but he's one of a number of players that they're looking at in the forward line. Nunez was one of those players, but not at that price.
So with Antony, it'd be going back to the discussion table with Ajax. Obviously, we've done the deal on Donny van der Beek recently, but another name that keeps popping up this window between Manchester United and Ajax, and that's the defender Timber, who could be used at right back, could be used at centre back. However, it's gone quiet recently. So could this be United looking at a double sweep here? Has Timber decided he wants to stay at Ajax to keep his World Cup hopes alive? Is there anything more on that potential move?
Well, I keep talking about priorities at United. But from what I can gather, midfield number 1, forward line number 2, and because of the number of central defenders that United have got on their books, you're looking at Maguire, Varane, Lindelof, Bailly, Phil Jones. And I know fans will say, well, hold on, how many of those do we actually want to keep? How many of those are actually performing well enough? That's up to the manager. But quantity-wise, the numbers are there. Hence why United are looking at other areas of the pitch first. But that's not to say they're not looking at central defenders, because they definitely are. Jurrien Timber is one. Again, I'll say Erik ten Hag knows him very, very well, was a regular under Erik ten Hag as well. Pau Torres is another name that's been mentioned to me as well, the Villarreal central defender. And he's been mentioned in dispatches with United in the past couple of summers as well as a few other clubs. Now, he's had a taster for Champions League football. They got to the semi-finals, of course, last season. I just wonder whether that would work against United in trying to sign someone like Pau Torres. But then the argument you can give to any potential signings. It's Manchester United at the end of the day, one of the biggest clubs in the world, but also imagine being part of a team that can bring United back to greatness again. So, that's the selling point for players as well. You can get heroic status at Manchester United if you're part of a team that takes them back to the top. So central defenders they are looking at. I would guess that when they fulfill any areas of the pitch in the central defensive area, I think there would have to be some sort of releasing of players first before they brought some in, simply because of the numbers that exist in that area just now.
Yeah, and we talk about outgoings. There's a few names that have been mentioned, Wan-Bissaka, but let's start with Dean Henderson. There was a lot of noise linking him to Newcastle over the last month, but that seems, is it Dan Ashworth has gone in there? That seems to have gone really, really quiet. What do you think of the future of Dean Henderson?
This is a really interesting one because I think everyone expected him to be the number one at the start of last season. But I mean, unfortunately for Dean Henderson, he contracted COVID and he was out for a little while. And at the same time, David De Gea kept his place and performed brilliantly and couldn't get removed from the team. So I think this summer, I think he's going to have to talk to United and say, look, where do I stand here? Am I going to be a number one goalkeeper? Because I think he's at that age with England aspirations as well. Who knows? The World Cup in the winter, that may be bad timing for Dean Henderson just now because he'll only have 2 or 3 months to try and establish himself as a number one. Will that be at United or will Erik ten Hag continue with David De Gea? That is definitely going to be one to watch as this transfer window develops, because I can't see a situation where Dean Henderson is going to be satisfied sitting on the bench for the whole season again. I just simply can't see it. And so then you've got the situation with other clubs. What kind of deal would United do? Would they allow him to go on loan? Would they want to sell him? Would they want a loan with an obligation to buy? It just will be one to watch, I think. The Newcastle one, yes, has gone quiet, but I think they're focusing on a couple of other transfers. So maybe they've still got the goalkeeping situation in the background. They're looking at players like Sven Botman from Lille and Hugo Ekitike from Reims as well. So I think they're focusing on those just now. And who knows, could the Dean Henderson one come up again?
It's difficult, isn't it, with these players, because when they're on 100 to 120 grand wage and then you're looking to get a 30, 40 million pound transfer fee, that's a lot of money for any club outside the top 7. So then you're looking at a loan move where just the wages could be covered, but then the club isn't recouping any money, so to speak, on the fee. So it'll be interesting with Dean Henderson to see what happens. And like you say, another player who won't be looking to fall on the bench next year is Wan-Bissaka. He needs football and he needs to prove himself again by the looks of things. He's really out of favour at the moment, despite all the potential that was there in his first season at United. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, I mean, as I said before, I think Erik ten Hag is going to look at everything with a clean slate. But some of the information that I'm getting from people close to Wan-Bissaka is if a good offer was to come in for him, I think United would consider it. But look, it's very early in the window just now. So a big offer, a loan offer, would that be enough? A loan with an option, a loan with an obligation? And it also depends on Erik ten Hag's way of playing as well. Will he want somebody in that position who's going to be a little bit more attacking than Aaron Wan-Bissaka? Because, you can't argue with the defensive qualities of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. I think the criticism that's been pointed towards him is what he offers in an attacking sense. So that will depend on what Ten Hag decides when he's got them in for pre-season training and he sees what everyone can do. So you can't rule out Wan-Bissaka staying. It just seems one of those players that if United did get an offer for him, I think there would be one that they'd look at before deciding on his future.
A lot of players' futures up in the air, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. I think you're going to be mentioning Manchester United's name quite a lot this window, Dharmesh. And as always, and obviously with the incomings as well, everything's moving. But obviously, as ever, fans want everything to happen right now. So patience is a virtue. I think we've covered everything, which is good. We've spoken about the midfield, we've spoken about strikers, spoken about defenders, and of course, people, if they want to find out more up-to-date reports, they can come and find you online. They can find you on Twitter. They can find you on Sky Sports News, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, our transfer shows. Well, I mean, we're doing transfers every day, of course. Our bespoke transfer shows, Good Morning Transfers, Transfer Talk, and the Transfer Show, that they'll start on August the 1st to really kick in until the end of the window, leading into deadline day, of course. And the Transfer Talk podcast, we record our first one tomorrow, actually.
Amazing.
So that'll be out on all good podcast providers from tomorrow evening, I think.
Amazing. You're about to get even busier, Dharmesh. If you don't need anything else, there's a podcast to record now as well. Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. We're up to date with the latest Manchester United transfer news. Keep an eye on Twitter and keep an eye on All for United. Hit that subscribe button, hit a like on this video and share it for more up-to-date transfer news as we try to get, obviously, the best reporters out there to come and give us a lowdown on all things Manchester United. Dharmesh, have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching. We'll speak to you in a bit.